hello there, and again, welcome to another session here on the web of Bible studies or perhaps a sermon series that we're going through. We hope that you're finding the material edifying and helpful in your walk and growth in knowledge and grace of Jesus Christ, because that certainly is our intent. We wanted to take, though, before we get started, this moment just to remind all of you that if indeed you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, feel free to go ahead and email us at billw@cgi.org. That's billw@cgi.org. Feel free to write at any time through the course of the presentations, because we want to know what you're thinking, and if indeed we're missing something that you'd like us to address, to draw our attention to it. So don't forget, ask some questions or make some comments and help us out with some feedback. We certainly do appreciate that as well. And again, that address is billw@cgi.org. And go ahead and feel free to do it at any time. So right now, without any further delay, let's get back to the sessions that we're studying this week.
All right, well, with that, I want to bring your attention back now to Part 5. Here we go, Part 5, questions about the beast's mark. And that's what we've been kind of covering here to a large extent, and had commenced into what I call the technology rabbit hole, or the rabbit hole of technology. And a lot of this is predicated, let me bring your attention back to Revelation chapter 13, because that's where the beast is introduced to us, and in specific Scripture 16, where it says here that we are poeod. We are poeod. We are caused to get this mark. At some point in the future, this charagma is going to be put upon the people, and the beast, the government, is going to secure, is going to go ahead and what you could say put upon. It is going to ordain or serve the people, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to be given, to receive. This is verse 16, Revelation 13, this charagma, this mark, this etch, this scratch, this digging, this, what you could say, mark that is going to be basically put upon the people at that time. And it will be, as we come to understand, not only certainly perhaps physically and actually, but certainly metaphorically, in the sense of the name of the beast and so forth being put in the right hand and on the foreheads, that when in fact you don't have it, if you don't, you won't be able to buy, you won't be able to sell, you won't be able to work. In other words, this mark plays such an important role at this time in the unfolding of events, that you cannot be a sociocrat in this system unless you have whatever this charagma, this mark, is. And consequently becomes very important for us to recognize the fact that, it can be, as has been mentioned, I'm not going to belabor it, more than just Sunday observance, especially in lieu of the fact of what we've already begun to be introduced to with regards to some of the technology that we've exposed ourselves to, such as the corporation of Verichip, which is already in the marketplace and selling implantable chips in your hand or in your arm or on your forearm, allowing you to walk and actually be able to be more served conveniently at even resorts. We mentioned that one in Spain and so on, where people get them in their hands so they don't have to carry a wallet with them or a credit card or anything. They can just, as I was mentioning in kind of a funny way, ladies walking around in their bikinis, they don't have to worry about taking a purse with them or put their credit card in there or in here, wherever they would put them, because now they're self-contained. All they got to do is use their hand, and they'll put it on their room charge, at the bar or whatever, the restaurant or wherever they are. So this stuff is already happening. That's the point. And we mentioned about the other company that was called Somark being an ink company that eliminates the chips. Don't have to have a chip with SOMARC, it's ink. It's ink that works off the FRID, the radio frequency ID wave, as well as the close, what do you call it, the NFC, the near field communication technology. And it's all done via an ink, where you don't even have to have any kind of a physical chip that's inserted, and this provides, of course, another step of a chipless means by which certain individuals can be benefited by, opening up their door, garage door, turning on their stereo system, turning on the toaster, whatever they want to do by just waving their hands, I mean, it sounds sci-fi, I know. But guess what? Oftentimes science fiction becomes reality. It really does. And believe it or not, in many cases, some of us don't even realize the fact that we are indeed seeing oftentimes the future in front of us via these sci-fi movies. And that's another story. I'll get into that here in a moment. But brethren, the point of this is, and when we talk about actually maybe getting some of this and it being the actual mark, perhaps as an expanded understanding of the possibility of that being done, meaning some kind of device being inserted in us, forced upon us, mandated upon us. With that consideration as a possibility, the fact of it is, regardless, most importantly, we have to understand metaphorically, as was pointed out in the earlier sessions, that the hand and the forehead represent work and mind. And what this is all about is, where's your heart? Is it with the government? Are you going to concede at the expense of God's laws? Because that's what this is all about. And when it comes down to it, it's the identity of and the issue that God's concerned about regarding idolatry. That's what it's all about. Are you going to worship? Remember? Peruskama? Worship? Worship the beast? Or are you going to worship God? Look over here in verse 14, chapter 14 and verse 9. Chapter 14, I'm just going to cut to the chase because of time here. The third angel followed them, saying, with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast, if any man, Peruskamama, it says here that proskuneo, that's it, proskuneo. In this case, if you're going to proskuneo the beast and his image and receive his mark, his charagma, in foreheads and in your hand, and that's what this is about, are you going to embrace this government system? If you do, verse 10, God's pretty serious about this. The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So this is really about God and your relationship with him and what's more important to you. Appeasing the powers to be so that you can function peacefully within the system, or, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, take a stand and tell the system, which at that time was symbolized by Nebuchadnezzar, no, we're not bowing, we're not embracing, we're not going to take to this system because it's causing us to compromise our relationship with God. And at some point, brethren, and it's already upon us if you haven't begun to notice, you're going to have to pick a lane. You're going to have to pick a side. Are you with God or are you not with God? When you clear all the smoke, when you clear all the noise, when you clear all of the political identity and mishmash of Marxism and capitalism, globalism and nationalism, when you clear it all away and put all that to the side, where is your heart, your mind, and your work, your effort? What do you embrace to truly and properly reflect? Matthew 6, and in verse 33, we are told very clearly, seek the kingdom first. All things will be added unto you. We're told, and I think all of us had gone through the counseling sessions when we had opportunity to consider baptism very seriously, that the minister perhaps brought to your mind Luke 14, which is essentially the chapter that we in the ministry oftentimes call the counting the cost chapter, where if you're contemplating seriously baptism, every one of you who are seriously considering baptism need to read Luke 14, verse about 25 through to the end, 35. Don't read it now, but read it later. But my point is, you need to consider what Christ is talking about when he is saying what he's saying, because at some point, some generation, whether it's ours or not, at some point, and or maybe perhaps even in the course of your life, at some point, whether it deals with a job, whether it deals with a choice of smoking a joint, or drinking something that you shouldn't be drinking, or taking opportunity to be with somebody you shouldn't be with, whatever that may be, those compromises, brethren, illustrate to God. Those behaviors manifest what's more important to you, your appetite, your own lusts, your desires, or God's. Because if that's the case, hey, guess what? You're the idol. And that don't fly with God. That don't fly with God. And that's what this is all about. But on a far more larger, intense scale. Because at some point, the government will engage and impose its will on the population of the world. Why do I know that? I know that. I know that. You know that. Daniel 7. I'm going through the book of Daniel in the Bible studies. And if you don't, you want to be reminded of it, go back and rewind to chapter 7 and read what chapter 7, Daniel 7's all about. It's about this thing combining with 10 other kings of authority who pool their assets together to serve this tyrant the Bible identifies as the beast, for the purpose of serving what is called a Babylonian mystery system. And unless you're part of it, you won't be able to work and you won't be able to eat. Almost kind of like today with the word that I used before. The word I was using before is how we're all being conditioned. We're going to come back to that word. It's important. Because I'm here to tell you, brethren, and you know it as well as I do, I can't even go into a grocery store without one of these things on. Now, I'm not saying this is the mark of the beast. Don't misinterpret me. I'm just saying the principle. It's not the mark of the beast. The principle is all about, you want to go get a bunch of bananas? You want to buy some raisins? Bill, you need a loaf of bread? Boom, put it on. You want a haircut? Oh, well, you got to wait. Put it on, sit over there. Okay, you're up. Get up, sit on the barber chair. You can take it off. But you're all over me. You're cutting my hair, you're shaving, you're all over me. Well, you can take it off. Why couldn't I take it off there when you're 15 feet away from me? It's not even logic. What's that about? Conditioning. Conditioning. I mentioned in passing how today, if you would go into an airport, onto an airplane, and there were no x-ray machines, no TSA agents there, wouldn't that be weird? Just to be able to walk through? For those of us who fly, I remember those days back in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s when I was flying all over the country in my water treatment days, because that's what we just, I could be late, get to the airport 2 hours. I was at the airport sometimes a half hour to 45 minutes before my flight took off. Why? Because I could do the O.J. Simpson thing, and run through the airport, and I got my ticket and just slide to the podium, show her my ticket, and get into my seat. There were no lines. No. But now we've been conditioned. And so here, the Bible says, brethren, get ready to, at some point, pick a side, get in a lane, because at some point in your life, you will be faced with making decisions for God over your desires or over the pressures being put upon you to appease, conform, or concede. And dropping down here in Luke 14, verses 33, I just want to say this. Verse 33, very important scriptures, Jesus stating here, so likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsakes not all that he has. And that's not talking about your homes or your cars or your silk ties or your linen dresses or the nice things that you've come to appreciate and like and so on. It's not talking about having to leave all of those things. Don't take me out of context. It's good to have good things. You want to enjoy a good bottle of wine, have at it. Or nice things in life, a car or a nice home. And God's blessed you in such a way whereby you can have a big house or you can have some extra liquid cash to go here and there and travel and so on. Hey, that's all good stuff. But what God is saying here, what Jesus is trying to tell us here, is don't make that your priority. In other words, be willing, have the frame of mind to be willing to let it go if you have to. I remember one of the first lessons I've ever learned in God's church was the first Feast of Tabernacles when Margie and I went up to the Wisconsin Dells. Michelle wasn't even born. My youngest daughter, Julie, was born. And it was three of us. We went up to the Wisconsin Dells. I don't know if Julie even remembers. She was so little. She was like 1 year old or so. But the point of it is, I remember, and we always do this. My family does. It's our tradition. We always say a prayer before we finally mount up into the vehicle and drive out the driveway and off to wherever we're going. And that first feast, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Man, what I got in my car is nowhere near what I got in my house. Comparably speaking, I'm leaving an awful lot behind. I am leaving an awful lot behind. And then you go to the feast and you hear about being a pilgrim and traveling through time, and you're in the course of this physical life, you're just here for a time, 70, 70 years. If you're beyond that, well, hey, you're on borrowed time, but praise God, you've got a little bit of extra time to enjoy life. But the bottom line is this life, this physical life, was never intended to be eternal, so you know that you're just pilgrims passing through. Not part really of this land, of this dimension, and so on. And I thought to myself, wow, that's quite a state of mind. And I've tried never to forget the fact that if I had to leave my house, if I had to leave everything behind, that I'm willing to do that without an argument. Not like, no, but willing to just let it go and leave. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. He's saying that, so likewise, whosoever he be with you that forsakes not all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. You cannot be my disciple if you can't do this. And that's why 26 through 33 is an important read for anybody contemplating baptism. Very important read. Verse 34, salt's not good, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? In other words, what's the purpose of it? If you're wishy-washy, if you're lukewarm, if you can be tossed to and fro, and with the direction of the wind, make your adjustments to appease and compromise and concede for your benefit and selfish improvement and gain. God doesn't want fair-weathered disciples. He wants committed people, brethren. It starts with baptism. That's what he's looking for. That's what he's looking for. And so it says here in verse 35, it is neither fit for land, that is this kind of material, even for the dunghill, but men cast it out. He that has an ear, let him hear. Let him hear. Jesus reemphasizes. And he says the same message basically to the Laodicean church over there in Revelation chapter 2. The lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. Why? Because you're wishy-washy. You can't make a decision. You don't have a lane. You don't have a choice. You're not making choices. Yes and no. Absolutes. Find your place. Stand up for what you know is right. Exercise your voice. And be the activist God wants you to be. And that's important. Jesus wants strong people who are willing to make the sacrifices necessary to essentially go ahead and glorify their God in their work and in their hearts and minds. Because that's what this charagma is all about, brethren. Where's your heart? Where's your mind? Is it in this world? Or is it in God's world? The world of your future, of the one that you're aspiring to immortality for. So what we're going through, back to this, is a heads up, an FYI, a warning to all of us that the world is moving in a technological development trend that is real, brethren. When I'm up here talking about nationalism and globalism, I'm not kidding. I'm going to introduce you to a guy that is really just scares the bejeebers out of me. He just was talking a few days ago over in the city of Davos. They had a big meeting there, over 3,000 to 4,000 globalists meeting, talking about globalist items, subjects, things that are going to take America's assets and re-divert them and plug them back in to the new world order's agenda. That's what it's all about. As I've been talking about, it's all about policies. And what I'm about to introduce to you, when you couple that up with the technologies that are growing and developing and coming on stream, coming up on the grid, and granted, agreed, not all of them are matured enough to even yet be in use. But the fact of it is, money's being spent by guys like Elon Musk, money's being spent by Google in subdivisions of their corporation, investing not hundreds, not thousands, millions of dollars into some of this technology that we're going to talk about. We left off in part 4 with this one. So let's jump into this rabbit hole again and go down a few more rungs into this hole. Artificial intelligence. Wow. If you haven't had the opportunity to view the web chat that Mike James and I did, probably about a year ago or so, I think it was, when we did that, let me recommend to all of you to do that. You can go to cgi.org, our international website, cgi.org. Go across the top to Armor of God. Hit on that. Drop-down links will occur. You'll see web chat listed. Hit on web chat, and then scroll to the artificial intelligence web chat, Mike James and I. We spent about 35, 45 minutes unpacking what artificial intelligence is. I don't want to spend a lot of time on artificial intelligence, only because the next one after this is the one I really want to spend some time on. But let me say this as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. Artificial intelligence is basically predicated on data, 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 data. The more data you are able to get, the better you can develop the artificial intelligence into whatever device that you're developing for the purpose of controlling and or manipulating whatever that device is intended to do. So that's why the Chinese are on this binge of accumulating, grabbing, capturing, consuming data, 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 data. They've been here for decades getting data on all of us, whether it be through blood tests that all of us have taken at hospitals, whether it be some of us innocently, oh, I'd like to know my ancestors. I think I'll go get my DNA checked. Well, hello. But granted, regardless of that, the fact of it is they've got a lot of information on all of us without us even knowing it, just by our just normal living and daily duties of doing the things that we do by virtue of the demands of life itself. But my point, artificial intelligence is predicated on data because it's all about processing. The more data you can have and the faster the device, computer or machine or whatever it is, can process that. They can download, like for instance, even games. And in this one case, as you'll see in the web chat that Mike and I do, they pitted a champion against a computer, and I forget the name of the game right now. It was a Chinese game, it was an Asian game, and the computer beat him. They put all kinds of possibilities, kind of like the video games that some of us play today here in the U.S., and they had all kinds of programs that they just kept downloading this thing into, and this thing then was able to process much faster than the champion could, a human being. And it was by virtue of the ability of that machine to process all that information that allowed it to develop a strategy to kick that guy's you-know-what. And he beat him. Beat the champion of all things, a machine, you know. So it goes to the point. You know, you probably remember the 1968 movie of 2001 called 2001, wasn't it? Odyssey, Space Odyssey 2001. And it was all about a computer named Hal. That was the star of the show. Okay, spoiler, anybody doesn't want to hear what I'm about to say, turn your volume down so you can't hear me. I'll give you a thumbs up when I'm ready to get you back online. If you want, I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Turn it down if you don't want to hear the spoiler. But here's the spoiler. The movie was all about a computer that basically hijacked the spaceship or the space station. I forget now which one it was. And the movie was about how they wanted to get this computer to be wound down to where they could unplug it, because they couldn't even unplug it. It was so out of control that it was actually controlling everything. It wouldn't die. And they couldn't turn it off. And so the movie was all about that. You can turn your volume back up. But my point is that these programs illustrate these kinds of things that do actually later on in years come down to fruition. And in this case, you know, I remember even movies back, television series. Remember Buck Rogers in the 1950s? I was like 5 years old, 4, 6 years old. And I remember Buck Rogers with a mobile wireless phone. Buck Rogers in the 1950s. Hello. And here we are. Sci-fi? Yeah, back then. But today, reality. Reality. Wow. That's what you call progress in so many ways. In this case also, we were introduced to the Matrix. In 1999, we had the movie The Matrix, you know, the red pill, the blue pill. You want to stay in your reality, you take the blue pill. You know, you just want to go and see more, you take the red pill. And it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's just red pills and blue pills, you know. My point is, these movies move us, they move us into areas of opening our minds to see things beyond the reality that we have, and of which now, brethren, I'm not making this stuff up, are items being engineered, explored, tested, experimented with to develop products for the potentiality of actual usage for whatever purposes that they will be used for. And I don't think any of us are so naive that we're not going to think that it is going to not be used for manipulation, nefarious activities. Wrong people get control of these devices as they become more mature and developed. Who knows what can happen? But I got a good idea. Revelation 13, 16 through 19 is where we're all going in some respects. Cyborgs, cybernetic organisms. It's called a portmanteau. I didn't even know what that word was. I never even heard of the word. Had to look it up to find out what that word was. It's a being with both organic and biomechanitronic parts. A being, a machine, and man. Remember the movie, The $6 Million Man? Remember that? Or how about an android? An android that basically is a robot, an artificial being made to resemble human beings and made out of material that is like human, termed androids. Westworld. Anybody watch Westworld? That's what that's all about. Stepford Wives, remember? Oh, sit down. Yes, sir. I want coffee. Yes, sir. You know, remember that? The Stepford Wives. And of course, Star Trek, The Next Generation, you were introduced to androids. And you think that this isn't already a possibility? Jimmy Fallon interviewed one of them on his show. And she talked and made jokes and even told him that she'd be a better host on his show than he was. You can see that on that web chat. We have a clip of where Jimmy Fallon is interviewing this android that he interviewed on that particular show. But this technology, brethren, is being done as we speak. It's being done in Japan. It's being done in Singapore. It's being done in South Korea. It's being done throughout the United States. There are companies, as I said, embedded in other companies that are small departments at this point operating on limited budgets in the millions, but nevertheless for the express purpose of exploring the possibilities of developing this technology so that it can, in fact, go beyond where it is going. And this is all, brethren, in the works, happening now. And you know it as well as I do, as this technology develops, it will take quantum leaps. It won't be linear. Because one thing leads to another, whoom, now we can exponentially advance into a whole new area. I didn't know this would do that. Did you? Oh, man. Well, let's start over here then. Forget all that stuff. You see what happens? And the technology becomes more sophisticated, more developed, and of course, far more potentially capable of doing things that we as people would hope would not experience as some of these things get developed. So it is sobering when you realize that the World Economic Forum here just last week, I understand the dates were the 26th through the 29th of this month, so that was what, today's the 30th, so they ended yesterday, I guess it was. Let me just take a moment here to explain to you what the World Economic Forum's annual meeting is all about. This is in Davos, Switzerland over there, and I'm going to quote this: the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos Cloisters is the foremost creative force for engaging the world's top leaders in a collaborative activity to shape the global, regional, and industrial agendas at the beginning of each year. It will bring together approximately 3,000 participants from around the world and aim to give concrete meaning to the stakeholder capitalism, wink, 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 new world order, global community of nations, assist governments and international institutions in tracking progress toward the Paris Agreement, of which we now have just been notified last week that we've been plugged back in by an executive order. I'm talking policy. I'm just bringing it to our attention. That's what these guys are talking about. and sustainable development goals, and facilitate discussions on technology and trade governance. So that's what this is all about. And the topic of this was obviously heavily influenced by, and here's the gentleman I'd like to introduce to all of you today. You need to write his name down, follow him. You need to be awoken on this. You need to wake up on this, brethren, so that you are aware. Follow this guy, Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab. I've got an excerpt here of him. He's kind of hard to understand. You have to listen closely. I'm going to play him here in a short. But you do want to write that name down, and every once in a while, just Google him. Kind of mark him. And watch him for your own edification and just to keep you alert to some of the developments of this World Economic Federation. Because as I said before, this guy kind of, he's a sobering kind of character when you think about things like we would in light of biblical prophecy on what he's saying. Because what he's saying is playing right into, and I'm going to share some of these things with you in a minute, of what our Bible is telling us about. And as I say, it is quite sobering, because what this guy is essentially talking about, this term he uses, technocracy, that is basically what he is all about, which includes, and that's where this goes, and this is the big one, it includes a technology called nanotechnology. It's called nanotechnology. And it's quite a sobering and very revealing technology. Let me explain. Nanotechnology, or nanotech, is the use of matter on an atomic, molecular, and supramolecular scale for industrial purposes. Remember what Eisenhower's parting words were? America, beware of the industrial complex. The military, in his case, industrial complex. Again, nanotechnology is a technology on the atomic, molecular, and supramolecular scale for industrial purposes. That's the short. Now, a little bit more detail. Nanotechnology is the study and use of structures between 1 nanometer and 100 nanometers. Keep that in mind. How it works. Nanotechnology is the understanding and control of matter at the nanoscale at dimensions between approximately 1 to 100 nanometers, where unique phenomena enables novel applications. Why? Because we are in the sub-bacteria, sub-virus range. We're talking about things smaller than viruses, which are pretty small. I'll give you an idea about that here in a minute. But it goes on here. Encompassing nanoscale, it encompasses nanoscale science, engineering, and technology. Nanotechnology involves, here's what it involves, here's what's its purpose, here's where they're steering the technology for and goals for it to do. It's for the purpose of measuring, modeling, and manipulating matter. Manipulating matter at its length scale. Now, what am I talking about? The coronavirus. It is, for the sake of this display, 125 nanometers in size. Let's pretend. One 125 nanometers in size is the coronavirus. And we'll use that as our example. And let's say, because it does have a range, by the way, it can be as large as 500 nanometers. It can come in that range, 125 to 500 nanometers. I'm not going to give you any other terminology. Let's just stick with nanometers. So, we've got nanotechnology at 100. To 1. And those are robots. And it gets better. Wait till you see where we're going. As I was mentioning to somebody, the deeper I went in this rabbit hole, the deeper it gets. It's really amazing, brethren, where this technology is going. So as you can see, comparison to a virus, the coronavirus in particular, 125 nanometers in size to maybe 500, although that's a rather large version of it and very uncommon. Usually it's much smaller than 500 nanometers. But nevertheless, the point being made, I think you can see my point here, is that these nanotechnology robotic devices that are being developed are indeed smaller than even a virus. And why would that be, you would think? And we will see some of the potentiality here. But let me say this. Our Mr. Schwab is on record. This is a quote from Mr. Schwab. The Great Reset, you need to get familiar with that term too. The reset, write that one down, Google it. What is the globalist reset agenda? The Great Reset will lead to a fusion. This is a quote from Mr. Schwab. The Great Reset will lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identities, unquote. Whoa. You see where we're going? This is a real guy. You're going to hear his voice here in a minute. This is a guy well respected by world leaders today, and world leaders that are indeed leaning toward embracing, promoting, adding, engaging in this kind of thinking, in this kind of thought. And the United States of America today, brethren, in this post-election environment we are in, is now shifting its connection back into the globalist agenda. I'm talking policy. I'm talking policy. Brethren, we all need to be aware and begin to prepare mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and begin to understand what Jesus was talking about there in Luke 14. Now, I don't know when all this is coming down, and I don't want to be a Chicken Little saying it's going to happen tomorrow, because I don't know that. And certainly I think we're all mature enough, and I'm not saying these things, as I said before yesterday, or not yesterday, but the last time I spoke on this, I'm not saying these things to scare us. I'm just trying to be mature about this. I'm trying to be mature about this and just inform, to give us a heads up on this stuff as being real and that it's happening right now as we are living. And many of us who are much younger than me are probably going to see things that we can only imagine. Things that are amazingly at this point, perhaps considered magical. But what he's talking about here, this quote, is essentially alluding to the fact he's talking about fusing human beings with technology. Cybernetic organisms. developing human beings into cyborgs. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about using the implementation of machinery, robotics, machinery, in conjunction with the human body, fusing it together, the biology and the machines, for the purpose of enhancing the productivity, performance, healing. Who knows where many of this may go. I know that in watching the movies The Matrix, if you haven't watched The Matrix, it's an interesting movie because this the star, I never can say his name, so I won't try, but nevertheless, you know who I'm talking about. This guy named, I know his last name is Reeves. Canoe? I always call him Canoe. See, I told you, I can never pronounce his name. Cananoo? I don't know. No. I'll stop. Nevertheless, he, in the movie, he downloads information into his brain from an external hard drive and learns languages like a New York, in 5 minutes he's got down French and Spanish and German and Russian and Polish and so forth and so, I mean, he's just sitting there like, you know, downloading all this information into his brain. And we laugh. I was laughing when I was 5 years old with Buck Rogers and a wireless mobile phone. We laugh. My point, brethren, is this stuff with Mr. Schwab in charge is on a mission. And this is all about intermingling and interfacing, fusing humans with machine technology to develop a technocratic humanoid, basically. A humanoid that is basically a blend of a human and machine. Now, Mr. Claus said this, quote, "Remember, these technologies will operate within our own biology and change how we interface with the world. Smart dust arrays of full computers with antennas, each smaller than a grain of sand." That's sand. We're talking smart dust machines that are smaller than a grain of sand. What is smart dust? I never even heard of smart dust. I said, what's smart dust? Smart dust sounds pretty dumb to me. It's not dumb. Listen to this, brethren. The term smart dust in IT refers to a very small micro-electromechanical sensors, MIMS, M-E-M-S, MIMS. Even though these individual components may be as small as the size of a grain of sand or barely visible to the human eye, they can contain components such as circuits, sensors, wireless technology, as well as individual power supplies. Technopedia explains smart dust is, quote, "Smart dust can sense vibrations and other physical phenomena in space. These types of technologies, which are now generally in the design stage," okay? They're in the design stage. They're on the grid, they're on the engineering boards, they're looking at them, they're exploring them. How can we make it smaller? How can we make it more compact? How can we make it more dynamic? How can we make it more powerful? How can we make it do this, or how can we make it do that? Because it's too limited in this fashion, so let's try to expand the fashion. So they're in the design stage on a lot of this, and could be used in many different kinds of ways. Statistical analysis or information gathering are some of the ways. They would typically be a way to crowdsource large amounts of information to determine various statistical results. In a practical sense, smart dust elements operate near or at the nanoscale level, defined as the 1 to 100 nanometers. Many experts refer to smart dust as a nanoscale project or as part of the nanotechnology. As these types of projects move forward through some engineering challenges, they may have a huge impact on many industries in terms of automation and monitoring. Well, yeah, I think so. So, just one last few quotes here on smart dust and nanochips from Nexus, N-E-X-U-S, newsfeed.com. Quote, nanochips and smart dust are the new technological means for the advancement of the human microchipping agenda. The microchipping agenda. Due to their incredibly tiny size, both nanochips and smart dust have the capacity to infiltrate the human body, become lodged within, and begin to set up a synthetic network on the inside which can be remotely controlled from the outside. Did you hear what I just read? Did you hear what I just read? This is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing, brethren. It's the new world we're in. It is a brave new world in many respects. Needless to say, this has grave freedom, privacy, and health implications. Needless to say, for sure. Dispensing. How do we deliver these things? How do we deliver these things? And I'm quoting. I'm just reading this, brethren. I'm just giving you an FYI on the technologies that we're in and the technological rabbit hole we're in, so keep this in mind. I'm just trying to be mature about this. I'm just trying to inform you, not implying anything that's being done now. Don't take me as such. I'm not saying it's actually being done now. What I am saying is that at some point in the future, as these things begin to get developed along the lines of their evolution, it is certainly logical and naive not to think they are not going to be deployed in certain ways by those in control of the steering wheel of whatever that is. So, delivery systems for nanochips and smart dust. In a fundamental way, vaccines, GMOs, bioengineered food, and geoengineering chemtrails are all connected, as they are delivery systems whereby this miniature technology of nanochips and smart dust is planned. Now, I don't know if there's any connection. I'm not into conspiracies. I really am not. But I'm just saying, I'm in the bleachers watching the game unfold. I like watching games. I like football, I like baseball. I'm watching the game. I agree. I'm watching from the bleachers. I'm not in the dugout. I don't know the ins and the outs of the backdrop and the background of a lot of this. But I am seeing from what I'm seeing that I just mentioned, why in the world would a billionaire like Bill Gates just 2 weeks ago become the largest farmland owner in America? I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't know. But I think it merits some consideration. Why would a billionaire be interested in farmland? In farmland. He happens to be Microsoft's founder, so that kind of gives us a bit of an insight, perhaps. But yes, Bill Gates is the largest farmland, not landowner, farmland owner. According to the numbers that I was able to uncover, roughly around 268,000 acres of land that has been basically purchased by him in this case, and of which he intends to farm. He does intend to farm it as he goes forward. So I just found that interesting, and it did bring to my mind certainly some questions as to why in the world would a billionaire like Bill Gates be interested in farmland. Last quote, "We need to be very careful and think critically as we go forward into a world of fantastic technology. Like the surgeon's knife, it can heal or kill. Given everything we know, it would be naive to believe that nanochips will only be used for good." And so we have what I said here as far as smart dust is concerned, something that is potentially capable of being used for a variety of purposes, and especially when you consider the miniaturization of these devices and signs, you wonder, wow, what it can be used for. So with that being said, let me do the best I can here. Can I use this mic to amplify this? Huh? All right. So I will introduce to you Mr. Klaus Schwab. I really want to do this, brethren, just to take a moment here on this, because I think it's important for you to hear this man's voice and from his own words basically see what he does indeed plan and is hoping to plan for yours and my future and the rest of the world. And maybe what I'll do is I'll use this. Could I use this? Okay. So he's a little hard to understand, but do the best you can to listen to him closely. This is a speech he gave at the World Economic Forum.
June of this year.
It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation, and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality.
I'm buffering. Apparently, I lost my signal for some reason. It's buffering. Well, I'm not going to fool with it here. Essentially, what he is saying is that 75 years ago, after World War II, we, as a creation of people on this planet, realized certain things had to change. And as well, the coronavirus, this whole CCP virus event, the crises, he used the word crises, has caused many people to reconsider resetting new normals. Why? Because it has shown the globalists, by watching how everything has unfolded, how easy it was to shut down the world. To shut down the world. Whether you agree with this or not, brethren, the results are hard to deny. The fact that we're in our homes, our children are out of schools and being homeschooled even when they should be in public schools. Businesses cannot open up. If they do, get fined. Consequently, curfews are being imposed upon. I got to be in like you do at 10 o'clock. Lest if you're out on the street, you might get pulled over by the police asking, what are you doing? I mean, that could happen, because if you don't have a good reason for being out, you'll be told to go home like your mom and dad did when you were 14 or 12. So the fact of it is, we are in a situation where economies have been destroyed. You talk about Italy, you talk about Spain, you talk about France, and of course, the strongest economy in the world was taken down inside of a few months, and we've been battling this situation since March, February, you could make the case, of last year, which puts us now almost on the threshold of a year-long crisis that at this point really still does not seem to have any end in sight on the way things are being handled, regardless of who was in that White House. So the reality of it is, brethren, we've got a situation where a lot of people have learned a lot, people that we really would rather not have learned a lot, but nevertheless they have. And Klaus Schwab is one of them, who is very determined on a mission to utilize the infusion of technology with the biology of human beings for the purpose of, in his mind, as other excerpts will tell you, as you become more familiar with Klaus Schwab, it's all about control, surveillance, and manipulation. Now, I'm talking in context of the mark of the beast, so let's keep that in mind. And again, I'm not trying to scare any of us. I'm just saying it's time we all open our eyes to the realities of what the Bible is telling us in the latter days will occur. What am I saying? The table's being set. Am I saying it's happening tomorrow? No. Am I alarmed about this? No. I'm sobered. I think all of us should be sobered by it. But the fact of it is, we need to be mature about it and take it in our stride, because God is still on His throne, brethren. God is still on His throne. You and I, all of us are still Christians. And regardless, if we're baptized, regardless of what happens to us, at least we should aspire to this state of mind. It doesn't matter, because death to us is what? Rest. Rest. In the protection of what? The grave. The grave. Those are realities, our realities. So it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at this stage of the development, or even if it was even worse and it was already well engaged. The fact of it is, we all have to be, and I speak to a lot of the young people, we all have to be aspiring to the attitude of what Christ described is ideal there in Luke 14. So, with that being said, I'm going to stop here. We're going to go to part 6. Because time's run out on me, and unfortunately I wanted to conclude this and not be rushed with it all. So until next time, and I think that'll be in about 2 weeks, we'll go ahead and finish up this in a part 6.